rising star in the NAACP. You probably saw him on television in 2020 because he was out there talking about some of the different police shootings and cases that year. And we examined his family's whole trajectory and his life. And when he was a child, his mom was moving him around all the time. They moved, many times a year as they struggled and as she struggled to pay the rent in many places. Sometimes when she needed to get credit to keep on the electricity, she used his social security number or his sibling's social security number. So when he became an adult, he already had tarnished credit. She took out student loans in order to have some funding to help feed her children. And, his mother, Stefana, I think a lot of readers will really empathize with her. James Woodall's story is very moving, and it helps you understand. Sometimes you see someone at the forefront out there at the front of the line for the NAACP and you don't know their story, and he's lived a story of struggles. And one of the things that comes through when you follow his story is that he pushed inside the NAACP for change. He pushed for the NAACP to pay more of its state leaders. Many of these positions are volunteer roles, but when he pushed for reform, he really ruffled some feathers. And so his story is a good one to read.
Ebony, if you could, for people who haven't been kind of paying attention to the structural forces of what reinforced, what created these wealth gaps. I mean, going back in Woodall's case to, his grandfather and the GI Bill, all the way to, redlining. What are some of the big kind of structural causes for an increase in this black-white wealth gap?
Well, I think we have to go all the way back to the beginning, when Black Americans were enslaved people, because that is the beginning of working and not being paid when we think about the black-white wealth gap. And then as we move through history, as Louise and I cover in this book, people will see points where programs were in place. Sometimes they were exclusionary, but sometimes there were programs that were not properly set up in a way for Black Americans to participate or to thrive in them. So you mentioned the GI Bill, and that's a really good one to mention. When it was set up to benefit veterans of World War II, it was for all veterans, regardless of race. But it was not administered at a federal level, so it was administered in local communities. And because of that, and because there was discrimination on the local level in some communities, many Black Americans, the vast amount that were veterans and tried to use the bill, were not able to. And so there are some estimates that like less than 3% of Black Americans were able to use the GI Bill for housing. It was, of course, set up for housing, education, and also the ability to start, businesses. In our book, we have many families, more than half a dozen that we interviewed, that told us their family stories about how they were not able to use the GI Bill, which contributed to the setup of white middle class in our country. And so when we think about that, this was a point in history where Black Americans, they were just not able to take advantage of this benefit that would have had an economic impact for many of them that were veterans.